Good evening. I'd like to call the July 5th Town Board meeting to order. Ms. Marco, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Christou?
Present.
Mrs. Miller-Herrera absent. Mr. Dotson?
Present.
Mr. Mastriani?
Present.
And Mrs. Collins?
Present.
4 present, 1 absent.
Thank you, Ms. Marco. A quorum is present. Please join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Chief Brown, would you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are lucky enough to be swearing in a new officer today to our police, so we're going to kind of go a little out of order. And we're going to start with Resolution 212 of the year 2023, and the clerk will read.
To appoint a police officer.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller-Herrera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Collins?
Yes,
4 yes, 1 absent.
resolution passes.
Thank you.
Chief, do you want?
Yes, I'll grab it 1 second. Good evening and welcome. Today is a special day as we officially welcome and swear in a new police officer who has chosen a noble profession, one that requires courage, integrity, and commitment to serving and protecting our community. This ceremony marks the beginning of his career with the Rotterdam Police Department, and we are honored to witness this milestone in his life. Before us stands Christopher Yankowski, a 4-year member of the SUNY Albany Police Department who was chosen to embark on a new chapter in his career, transitioning to the Rotterdam Police Department. He brings with him a wealth of knowledge, experience, and unwavering dedication to law enforcement. Today, we officially welcome you into our ranks and acknowledge your pledge to serve with integrity and honor. Just have you stand. Yes, we're okay, Don. Chris, left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand, and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Christopher Yankowski,
Do solemnly affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States
do solemnly affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duty of the office of police officer
and that I will faithfully discharge the duty of the office of police officer
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Congratulations. Yeah, tomorrow morning. So, yeah, I thought I was going to say that. I wonder if I recognize you, right? But like I said, I can swear you in tomorrow. Check with the chief, whatever. I'll be here all day tomorrow. Okay?
Nice to meet
Thank
you
you.
guys.
Welcome. Hi, Mr. Mayor. I'm there.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is.
We do need to go into executive session, so I'm going to call for a motion for this board to go into executive session for discussion regarding the Rotterdam Patrolmen's Benevolent Association Incorporated with invited guest Ms. Gold.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I didn't hear who was first. Okay. Seconded by Mr. Christou. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller-Herrera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent to go into
Resolution
executive session.
passes, our motion passes, and we will enter into executive session at 7:09 p.m. I'm going to open public hearing number 1 to establish.
Do you want to redo that, or you're okay? Coming back from the executive session.
Well, I took the 10 when we made the motion until you're set.
We're going to start public hearing number 1 to establish a 6-month moratorium prohibiting battery energy storage system installations within the town of Rotterdam. Ms. Marco, is there anybody who wishes to speak?
Oh, I forgot to get my little thing. All that time and I forgot. I'm sorry.
We're all ready for vacation. Yeah, just ready for
I
vacation.
was over here, I forgot to grab it. So Kim, are you for
the moratorium, or the public hearing 1 and 2, or just?
Sure.
Okay, so if you're up. Or wait, Tim, no, you are. Kim, you're up. For number 1.
Okay.
And then we'll do 2 after.
Good evening, my name is Kimberly Ricker-Spinell. I live at 257 Crawford Road in the town of Rotterdam. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I know I sent all of you an email in anticipation of tonight's meeting, so I will just say, because we're kind of more on the record here than I am in an email, that I would really like to see a moratorium happen for both of these, for battery energy storage systems and for wind energy. I would really think that we could take a second to possibly consider changing the language of the moratorium so that we're not exempting any particular project by name, which I think sets a very poor precedent, and instead just exempt any project that has received final site plan approval from the Planning Commission, because the exempt project has received that. I also wanted to bring to your attention, many of you may have heard, there's a town about 2 hours south of here. It's called Warwick, New York. They're a town and a village. And within the past couple of weeks, they had not 1 but 2 battery energy storage systems fires. They started during the same weather experience. One of the projects has been placed for several years. The other project was less than a month old. I would not want to be a fly on the wall in the town superintendent's office in Warwick this week. He's got his plate full. And his public comment was, New York needs to slow down a little, and we all need to figure out what's going on so we can be safe. So I brought some articles for you from the mayor of Warwick, and some newspaper articles, and also from the Warwick Fire Department's Facebook page. They're volunteer firefighters, kind of like what we have here. Burn Baby Burn was what they needed to do. They had to have fire watches. Again, this is money that the town can't afford to be spending. We don't need these kind of hazards here, so I urge you all, as you have been doing, to keep the safety of our Rotterdam residents our #1 priority. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrea, are you for the public hearing 1?
Same.
Okay.
Same thing.
So do, thank you, honey, and I'll make sure they all get it.
Hi. I don't believe 6 months is long enough time for either of those moratoriums. I've got to go to ancient history here. My husband and I have been married for 49 years. When we first got married, my husband joined the fire department. Back in 1980 or so, there was a fire on Sanborn Road Hill, up in the hills. And it burned for over 2 or 3 days. I can't remember because it's ancient history, you know. The fire department was technically it's in Pattersonville, I think. So it's mutual aid. Mutual aid has whoever can show up. So most people have jobs. Who can show up during the daytime? People that are over 58 years old, people that are retired. A lot of people go to Florida. At any rate, we were lucky enough, they got us help. They got help from prisoners from the Mount McGregor facility. They fed them at the Rotterdam Junction Fire Department. Okay, this lasted at least 2 to 3 days. I can't remember, it is ancient history. Okay, you gotta remember, they try to recruit volunteer firemen, fire personnel, excuse me, ladies. Hard to come by. They had an open house this year. Not one person came through the door. Also, I want to address the foam that has to be used to put out some of these fires. You see it on the news, you're running advertisements. It's carcinogen. It's a carcinogen. Please remember that. And the wind power kills a lot of birds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kim, did you want to get up for the public hearing 2, or you're good?
No, ditto.
And you too, you're good? I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I don't
All right,
think-
so 1. I just want to make sure because
Yeah,
I keep
thank you.
repeating your name.
Is there anybody else here that wants to speak on public hearing #1 but didn't sign up for it? Chuck, is there anybody on Zoom that wants to speak?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, no one else? All right. No, I don't need a motion to keep it, right?
Yes, no?
No, we're
Oh.
keeping it open.
Oh, you keep it
Oh,
open?
oh, yeah, you can keep it. My one question, based on some of the comments made, if we were to amend the moratorium, would we need another public hearing? Or,
We're keeping the public hearing open.
oh, we're keeping it open?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, okay.
All right, then public hearing number 2, to establish a 6-month moratorium prohibiting wind generation system installations within the town of Rotterdam. Is there anyone who wishes to speak, Mrs. Margot? Ms.
The
Margot?
both of them said they already spoke.
Okay. Is there anyone else who didn't sign up about the wind moratorium? Anybody on Zoom?
There are none.
Okay, then we're keeping that public hearing open too. Now we're going to move to privilege of the floor. I remind everybody to keep your remarks to 4 minutes or less. And is there anybody who wanted to speak?
Tim Sweeney?
Hello, I'm Tim Sweeney. I live in the town of Schoharie, but my wife and I are here on behalf of my in-laws, her parents, Nancy and Jerry Barry. They live at 2456 Curry Road. Their property butts up against the town park, and they'd be interested in trying to swap some land with the town that they currently have with some land for the park to try to square out their lot. The land in question that they have is basically wooded, overgrown brush. The land they're looking to swap is also sort of wooded, overgrown brush. So we just want to know what we need to do to sort of see if the town would consider this as something we could move forward with, or if this was not something the town would be willing to look at. But that's pretty much where we are, and I have some plot plans here if anybody would like to look at them as to what we'd be looking to make the exchange for.
Is this something you want to be part of the record for tonight, or is it something that's all you have?
No, this can be part of the record.
Okay.
That'd be fine.
I'll make sure everybody gets it.
I just want to mention a couple of things regarding this request. This request, I met with Mr. and Mrs. Berry 3 years ago or so, 4 years ago, and to do a land swap, there's a lot of steps involved, and council, please correct me if I misrepresent, but there's something called a home rule or something.
It's called parkland alienation.
Right.
The state has to get involved relative to.
I've met with Assemblyman Santa Barbara, and I know that he is on board and has committed to do whatever needs to be done at the state level to help this go. From what I understood when I met with the Assemblyman, it was a resolution.
I'm going to pause you and
Okay.
ask that we bring this back up when we get back to comments and miscellaneous at the end,
Okay.
rather than privilege of the floor. We're eating up his time to speak.
Okay, I apologize, sorry.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. My in-laws have an attorney, Joanne Darcy Crump. She's also a surveyor. She has searched the town as grantor and did not find any easement to the people of the state of New York or the state DEC that might preclude the proposed transfer. So my in-laws are just hoping that there's an opportunity to work together and get this resolved so they can square up their property. It's a very strange and peculiar shape to the property. It's the lot. You can see it. I've drawn in there the different colors, the property that they would like to swap, the property that they would like to acquire, and the property they'd like to retain. So it's right there on Curry Road. And that's all I really have. I guess I would like to know what we need to do to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak that didn't sign up?
Brenda Trojan, 103360. A couple of things before I go into my actual. I just received a text before I came to this meeting. I don't know why you are calling the town about my house. The house is fine, abandoned. It's locked, and I had plenty of people looking after it. It's absolutely none of your business what is going on with my house. If you wish to buy it, go. If you want to make it your business, go ahead and buy it. I am praying. I brought this up to the meeting last month about 2 abandoned properties. And I'm hoping that nobody on this board or any of your people that work for you gave her my name and my phone number. I don't know her. I do not know her. Don't know her name, don't know anything. I'm just hoping that nothing was done. As far as, again, freedom of information request for the responsibilities of the town attorney, I don't get an answer. Okay, I don't understand what that's about either. That's the third FOIA that I've given you guys, and you can't give me an answer. May 10th, I told you that a beginning portion of the meeting was deleted, was not there. And that was Mr. Dobson explaining the water thing. I'm interrupted. Again, Ms. Collins, your explanation was false. It was not at the end of the meeting. It was at the beginning of the meeting. Just wondering what's going on with that. Now, concerning the water bill. Residents' water bill went up all over, but the commercial properties did not go up. Commercial properties pay $25 for the first 75,000 gallons of water. After that, it's 14. So how come they get exempt and the people in Rotterdam pay a lot? And if the residents of Rotterdam, if we are on an emergency thing with the water right now, which is 7 to 9 a.m., 7 to 9 p.m., should not that hold also for those businesses that use a lot of water, like the car washes? Why should we be penalized, but the car washes and restaurants and whatever using a lot more water than especially District 5, because I am going to be speaking for District 5. I do not care about the other districts. I will talk about District 5. Now, District 5 water bill for this year, $97.18. Because 4,000 units were missed. I don't know how they were missed. I know you tried to explain it, you tried to sell it well, but it doesn't make any sense. What about 2022? If in 2023 you guys missed 4,000 units, what about the previous year where our bill doubled? Now, and I know I'm going to hear some groans, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to talk about Viaport once more. Resolution 237-22. The lease is judicially defective, void, I'm not going to pronounce that word, you can look it up, and unenforceable. We gave them $250,000. And that was, Mr. Mastriani's explanation was because it was for rent. For the 7 1/3 months that they didn't receive rent. According to the lease, start of the payment would be on commencement date. That's the date that the landlord delivers the property, the entire premises with the landlord's work completed. From January
Brenda, we're over the 4-minute time.
Okay, hang on here. Oh, no, you're not. I
We're
got
at 4
it.
minutes
Excuse
and
me, I got a
26
timer.
seconds.
I got a timer.
We have a timer going and we're at 4 minutes and 26 seconds.
I'm not going to recognize you because you're not an elected official. That needs to come from the chairperson.
Brenda, my duties are as assigned and I've been asked to remind people when they're over their 4-minute limit to talk. You are over that limit, so I'm politely asking you to please respect the rule.
Yeah, I do respect it. I have 2 more minutes left on my timer.
You do not. You are now a minute over.
Okay. This keeps happening every time I'm up here. It's amazing.
I have asked other people to step down when they're at their time limit.
No, I've been to every single meeting. This is happening when it's with me. But that's okay. That's okay. Because there's another meeting, and if you don't think I'll be back, because I know exactly what this town of Rotterdam is doing, to one resident.
You are
One resident,
within
no.
your time limits.
No, I'm not. I put the timer on 4 minutes. Then your timer's wrong.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak that might not have signed up? Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to speak? Okay, then I'm closing privilege of the floor, and we'll move on to resolutions. Our first resolution is Resolution 211A of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To accept town board meeting minutes of June 14th, 2023.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr.
I'll
Dodson.
second the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson, second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rare is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 112 of the year 2023, we voted on at the beginning of the meeting for our police officer. So we'll go to Resolution 213 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To appoint Noah Messick to the position of cleaner.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rare is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 214 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To appoint Rukman Abzal to the position of payroll audit clerk.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I will do second. Any, on the question? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rare is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes, and Ms. Abdul is here. So if you want to...
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. Resolution 215 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To appoint Noah Baker to the position of park attendant.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Mastriani. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution number 216 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To temporarily appoint Joe Mastriani as deputy supervisor.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
A motion by Mr. Christou. I'll second it. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
I abstain.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
So 1 abstain and 3 yes and 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 217 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To enter into an agreement with Niagara Mohawk for the authorization of the Hometown Hero banners program to be installed on utility poles in the town of Rotterdam.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by
I'll
Mr.
second that motion.
Dodson, second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 218 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To authorize the town supervisor to execute the memorandum of agreement between the town of Rotterdam and the Civil Service Employees Association, recognizing the new job title of GIS Maps Location Worker.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 219 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To authorize the town supervisor to execute the memorandum of agreement between the town of Rotterdam and the Civil Service Employees Association, recognizing the new job title of wastewater treatment plant mechanic.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 220 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To approve budget transfers to the 2023 budget.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Mastriani. Do I have a second? I'll second. On the question, Okay, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes,
4 yes, 1 absent.
resolution passes. Resolution 221 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To accept certain real estate parcels from Schenectady County.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani on the question. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 222 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To authorize change order number 1 with AMZ Construction Services, Inc. for the salt storage project.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second, was that you, Joe?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 223 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To authorize change order number 2 on the E contract with B&D Industries for the Sewer District 7 Extension Number 2 project.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a
I'll
do
make the motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Dodson? Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 224 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To authorize the purchase of an audio-video sound system for the Rotterdam Senior Center.
Okay, do I have a motion? I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Christou. On the question,
Maybe we can get a 2-for-1 deal, Madam Supervisor.
I know.
One here in Town Hall.
That would be
Maybe.
nice.
That's a good.
the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 225 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To accept an award bid for the Rotterdam Senior Center roof replacement project.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Christou. On the question?
Was that Joe or was that?
That was me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, just want to make sure.
I must be
Mr.
deaf on this
Mastriani.
side or something.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Seconded by Councilmember Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 226 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To authorize submission of the New York State Water Infrastructure Improvement Act, WIA, grant application for the Town of Rotterdam wastewater treatment plant improvements.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 227 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To authorize submission of a New York State Water Infrastructure Improvement Act, WIA, grant application for the Town of Rotterdam Water Systems Improvement Project.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 228 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To negotiate and execute an agreement with Barton & LaJudas for additional engineering services related to the Rotterdam Senior Center roof replacement project.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a
I'll
motion?
make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution 228 passes. Resolution number 229, the clerk of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To negotiate and execute an agreement with Barton & LaJudas for the pumping station roof asbestos investigation and sampling services.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. I'll second. On the question, Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rivera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 230 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To negotiate and execute an agreement with Barton & Judas for mold assessment services.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani on the question. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rivera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes,
4 yes, 1 absent.
resolution passes. Resolution 231 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To negotiate and execute an agreement with Barton & Judas for professional engineering services for the Kiwanis International Park Waterfront Access Improvements Project.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani on the question. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rivera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 232 was tabled during the agenda meeting. So we'll go to Resolution 233. Also, for anyone who has the resolutions in front of them, there was a typographical error in the notice of hearing that we amended during the agenda session. It should say that the hearing will be held on the 9th day of August 2023. Right now it has tonight's date in it, but it's going to be at the next meeting, which is August 9th. Okay. So resolution number 233 as amended during the agenda meeting of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To recognize the introduction of local law number blank of 2023, change of zone from single-family residential R1 to retail business B1 on a portion of tax parcel number 59.19-1-4.1, known as 2917 Hamburg Street, and scheduling a public hearing thereon.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Mastriani. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rivera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 234 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To negotiate and execute an agreement with Web Instinct to upgrade and host website services to the town.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Motion by Mr. Christou. Do I have a second? I'll second. Okay. Any on the question? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rivera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 235 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To negotiate and execute an agreement with Barton & Judas for a trunk sewer access improvements project.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rivera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 236 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To authorize the supervisor to execute and sign a memorandum of agreement with the Rotterdam Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, Inc.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rivera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 237 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To call for an audit of the New York State 2022 general election.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Mastriani. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Rivera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. And that concludes our resolutions for this evening. We'll now move on to liaison reports. Do any of the board members have anything to report under their liaison committees?
So Joe made the motion. motion in a second.
Thank you. Okay, does anybody, do any of the board members have anything to say under miscellaneous?
Yes, Madam Supervisor, under miscellaneous, back to the buried property on Curry Road. Again, this was something that we tried to get off the ground 3-4 years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but we had a meeting. That meeting actually included Assemblyman Santa Barbara. He educated, forgive my memory, but he educated us on kind of the process involved. And I remember the term home rule somewhere, and that there was a specific protocol that there was a specific type of resolution that first the town had to pass, and then it would go to the state level, and then Assemblyman Santa Barbara had committed to helping the Berry family get the state portion of it pushed through. In my initial view of this, it seemed like a very reasonable exchange. The Berry family wants to square off the property just for maintenance purposes, and I'm sure they'll be glad to tell you, other reasoning behind it. It doesn't really impact the park area in any way, shape, or form, and I would be fully in support in assisting them to get this completed, and if there's anything I can do, I'll be more than happy to help.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a particular process that we need to go through to at least discuss it, so we can give them a yes or no, or maybe, or something?
I know that we had, last year, we had a meeting with their attorney, and there were certain things that Mr. Tingley had requested. I think one might have been an appraisal of the different parcels of land or something, but I haven't had any other contact since then. So we did start the talks last year. I can't remember exactly when, but I know that there were certain things that were asked for that I never came across my desk again.
So, and being that Mr. Tingley is no longer here, if there is a punch list of things that they need to do, can we get that to them at least?
Okay.
Do you two folks have any other questions, anything else that regarding this?
No, not really. As you said, the property line cuts very close to the house. There is some issues with, because it is a park and there are sometimes youth in the park past the park's closing. The other day my in-laws had some issues with some young people in their backyard with a flashlight moving around. So they would like to square up the property, be able to put up a proper fence. The way the parkland juts up past their house to Curry Road and is not really going to be ever be used by the park. The land itself is simply overgrown brush. It's wooded. Trees have been falling on my father-in-law's property for decades. He cleans it up. He's been mowing the lawn. It's really kind of town property, so it doesn't look poorly on his house. So there is a section that would square off the back. It would possibly be of more use to the town. They would certainly appreciate it, so they had more of a rectangular shape. If you look at the map, it's very jagged and triangular. They've been living in that house for 47 years. They're active members of the town and community, and they have.
Sweeney, has your surveyor done a before and after this diagram?
There is a proposed diagram on there that shows roughly. They haven't done an official. Darcy Crum has not done an official survey because if the town is not interested in moving forward with something like that,
Why spend the money?
why spend the money? And we have our own retainer, so.
So hopefully we can have internal dialogue, and if the town is interested in following through, we'll provide you with a punch list. My guess would be provide you with a punch list. Okay, we need an appraisal of the two parcels, we need a before and after survey, and then hopefully we can take it from there.
Yeah, also the amount of land my in-laws are requesting squared off would also obviously increase their property holding. That would assumably increase the amount of property taxes they'd be paying. So I thought it was a little strange when Mr. Tingley was talking about getting the property assessed because it's basically overgrown brush. It's not going to allow my in-laws to subdivide.
That could be a requirement from the state level.
Okay.
Because you talk about parklands, and it's parklands, doing anything with parklands back to a municipality or back to a private citizen, it's kind of like unscrambling an egg, if I'm not mistaken. So that might be something that would have to be done in the submission of the request on the state level of the parcel.
Okay.
So just keep that in mind.
The only thing I was saying was that it's not like they're gonna be able to subdivide the land and build a second house, there's not enough land, zoning laws would be in effect, so his idea that we were gonna like somehow get the land assessed, that there's some sort of like hidden, gold mine is just, I thought, a little laughable, because it seemed, they're not gonna be able to do anything more with the land except have something where the property boundary is not cutting large on the edge of their property, they can put up a fence, he would maintain it for years anyway, and it would allow them, some peace of mind. So, thank you.
Anything else? I just have a couple of things. Our Department of Public Works gave me their stats for June, and 99 permit applications came in, 99 permits were issued. In complaints, 53 came in, 25 are open, 12 were completed, and 16 are in progress. Okay, so they've been busy. Is there anything else that any of the members would like to bring up? Then I'll entertain a motion to close the meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Christou. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.